I gave this presentation at the US or North America, Europe uh, AI working group meeting earlier this month. It's always good to have a second go at it. So, can you see my screen and slides?
Yes.
Great. So before we get started, let's just put the antitrust policy notice up here, which is put up at the start of every Linux Foundation meeting. The details of the antitrust policy are on the URL provided there. And if you come from a member company, you can reach out to Andy Updegrove for further information. Without further ado, um, I can start. Um, I'm happy to go through these slides as it's quite small, the group, just the three of us. Feel free to stop, interrupt, tell me to go faster or not as fast in certain areas. Um, but let's get started. So OpenChain's mission is really about building trust in the supply chain or in the ecosystem. And what OpenChain does is create standards really to help sort of processes so we can build that trust. And it really enables people to, work faster, more efficient, and it can and be cheaper. Um, from my professional work, this really came about when I was dealing with a new supplier just before the end of the year, and they said that they were ISO 5230 conformant. The moment I understood that, then I immediately had a lot more trust for them. So when they were going to hand software to us, I knew that they were going to have certain rigor in their processes. And ultimately, when they did hand the software to us and their documentation, it became more apparent. So that for me is evidence that this mission really is working. As I mentioned, there are two open chain standards that we have worked on. The first one, 5230, which is around open source license compliance. Then the second one is 18976, which is around the security compliance. Both of these ISO standards really look at high level processes. They're simple, effective, suitable for all companies, shapes and sizes in all markets. Doesn't go into too much detail. It just kind of gives general principles behind certain processes. And there's a huge community that's rallied around these to not only create them, but support them. And they're freely available to all. So what evidence do we have that these standards are having reasonable impact? Well, the US executive order and NIST and CISA require the use of SBOMs with working with the US government, and both of these ISO standards from OpenChain required those use of SBOMs before the executive order came out. And they're flexible enough to meet these requirements. Another example is addressing the EU Cyber Resilience Act and the CRA. Again, these ISO standards, as well as the Cyber Resilience Act, make it a requirement to have record keeping, of which, as I said, the ISO standards are required to do so. And again, before the CRA really rolls out, a lot of companies have already signed up to these ISO standards, are already doing these record keepings. Okay, so with those two ISO standards, OpenChain got together to see if we could do something similar with AI. And we set up the AI working group, meets twice monthly. And we've got the details here, but you guys are already on the mailing list. But going through a bit of the history of where we got to in December 2023, there was an open source compliance summit, kind of a meeting of the minds, and a few of us got together and thought, this sounds like a good idea. So in January 2024, we created the study group with a goal to establish an industry-wide agreement on AI sort of management and set out a list of core principles that foster trust within AI. We said at the time we'd discuss AI ethics such as transparency and bias, but over 2024, those came into more and more discussions, and we decided we were for or against certain aspects of AI ethics. As we moved through the year, we discussed ISO 42001, the EU AI Act, and the NIST framework from the US, and we kind of pinpointed a number of primary challenges that the industry faces in implementing these regulations or these standards. So, through sort of open dialogue with the community and having explored these standards, we identified these key areas we wanted to work on. So, having an AI standard that covers both proprietary and open source software. And again, throughout 2024, we were debating, do we have it just for open source? Do we have it proprietary and open source? And in the end, we were kind of agnostic. We think the processes behind it are kind of the same. So we classified it for both. Um, we wanted to capture things around transparency and explainability. We thought that would be a good starting point in the AI ethics debate, and that may expand in due course. We did discuss having some discussions around climate change. We had someone present in 2024 on kind of energy consumption of LLMs, it's certainly significantly higher compared with other computing requirements. Is this a concern for OpenChain? We didn't know, but we thought we'd discuss the points anyway. And then finally, one of the key challenges around copyright in testing, validation, training data sets. This is really the bread and butter of OpenChain. So we felt this was appropriate to capture in the in the guide. So we had a look at different sort of conceptual approaches for determining key processes in quality AI compliance, and we identified a number of different areas. So having a policy related to AI management, sort of related to capturing maybe mitigation plans for issues that might arise, having clear accountability for a program, having processes to create AI bombs, kind of being agnostic on the format of those, having place to record where we put the AI bill of materials, having a process to determine kind of ownership and liability related to these models and data sets, having a process to determine the country of origin, how transparent we want to be, or certainly a process to work out how transparent a company wants to be, process to identify use cases and their limitations, and then a process to look at the IP rights, and then a whole host of other things like bias, privacy, sustainability. Now, I created this slide in December last year, and I can't remember the colors, so apologies for that. But all of these areas were places we certainly discussed in 2024 around the processes that we think we should capture in the guide. We then moved on to a session on model cards and had a look at different model cards in different formats. We had people from SPDX come and present. We also looked at the Hugging Face. We tried to find what the most relevant information was in a model card. And we thought that Hugging Face was really starting to take a hold in the community. So felt as though we could look at their format and identify kind of what is the essential information that's required. And at the time, and I think we're still in the same place, we don't know what the essential information is required, but we thought certainly capturing information coming from Hugging Face would be a suitable output. However, when we delved into that in more detail, we felt this was slightly out of scope of OpenChain because we started listing certain things that we thought would be important for a model. And we think that the likes of SPDX, Cyclone DX, they're probably more well versed in the capturing of the fields, and felt as though we should go up a level and look at the process rather than the individual fields. In July of 2024, we looked at the ISO 42001 in more detail over 3 different sessions. We had people who'd reviewed the standards and kind of identified a number of different key areas around allocation of responsibilities, suppliers, customers, etc. And we tried to look at where this overlaps with what we had thought would be good practices. OpenChain could complete this framework by providing an AI specification for the value chain. and replying to where and how through model cards, data cards, and impact assessments. As I said, we wanted to focus a bit away from the individual fields we required and maybe focus more on the processes behind it. We determined in the SBOM study group, which is different from the AI study group, that we should focus on the content and use cases rather than formats, as I said. So looking at the quality of the SBOM, how we integrate, how we manage the assets, and the ongoing vulnerabilities. So having a process behind how we deal with SBOM groups can be fruitful and important for good AI compliance. And ultimately, we realize that we go back to our sort of foundation and fundamentals and looking at license and security compliance in here as well. So the next couple of slides just looked at ISO 42001 and what we've already got with ISO 5230, which is the OpenChain license compliance. And the point of these slides is to notice the huge similarities between ISO 42001 and what we have in 5230. Yes, there are a few gaps that can be seen in this section as well around performance and improvement, but the vast majority, we did see that strong overlap between the two ISO standards. So we certainly thought that that would be a good kickoff for creating the guide. Just before we did that, we had Art, I don't know if you came along to this one, but we had the SPDX folks come and present their white paper. They have the QR code up there. It's a very good white paper and kind of highlights AI systems, how they combine software, data, and models, and kind of highlight the risks associated with the models, the data provenance, the privacy, model behavior. We looked at traditional SBOMs and realized that they didn't quite have all the relevant fields that an AI model would have. They identified that AI models can vary quite widely, but there are key fields over the number of different formats around sort of the model type, the training information, maybe energy, the use, the explainability, and bias, and the sort of size, ethics, maintenance, and risk. So there were a whole host of things that they identified. And if you look at this white paper, it highlights the different areas and looks at 42001, looks at SPDX, looks at EU AI Act and other regulation, the NIST framework, to see where things overlap and what's missing. And ultimately, SPDX produced their AI bomb list of fields. So OpenChain sort of recommended that people go and have a look at the SPDX AI bomb, but of course other formats are available. So that got us to the end of 2024, and we kind of agreed on objectives and direction for the future of work, which was to consider both upstream and downstream obligations in license compliance, avoid redundancies between AI bill of materials, model cards, and data sheets. And in kind of a worked example, I'll just build that slide there. We've got here where we've got lots of data sources coming into a data set and producing a data card. We have the model here where we have training information, inference information, of course, that can backpropagate, interact with the user, and we'd have a model card for the relevant fields here. But the AI SBOM is sort of a technical inventory. It's sort of a combination of the data card and model card, but really looks at how the model can be built and kind of what's inside, and is probably the more significant document, which is kind of the sum of everything rather than just the individual model cards, which describe maybe just how it performs and doesn't capture the relevant data sets and training data sets in there. So the AI SBOM compliance guide was where we really focused. And if you, and I can share these slides around after this, QR code goes to that AI SBOM guide, which I'll bring up in a few minutes. But ultimately, if you're wanting to get, sorry, if you were confident that people who were working in an AI project were trained and aware of the policy for good governance, that would certainly build trust. If you were confident that processes were being followed to ensure that there was accountable people and things were appropriately resourced, that would build trust. If you had good, clear documentation, that would build trust. And again, we keep on using the word trust, which is going back to that vision of OpenChain. The different sections of compliance that we highlighted were around competence and awareness of users building these models or using these models, the license obligations for training data sets, models, etc., people being transparent, having projects effectively resourced, having content reviewed for approval, having this bill of materials, and then having some governance behind it as well. And then once this is all implemented, that people are adopting the process for sort of generating, sharing, updating these AI SBOMs, and they become just part of the everyday routine of working with models. And of course, we'd like to automate things where tooling is available. So in summary, that AI SBOM guide, which again I'll come into in a moment, isn't just another document spreadsheet that people have to have. It's really about institutionalizing traceability and trust for AI systems. So, any comments before I just go into the guide? No? Okay, let me bring up the guide here. Which window is it in? Here we go. So here is the guide. I'm going to put this in the chat so people can look through at their leisure. Let's just download it. So we've created the guide. We've got version 1 out and is available for people to use. We're looking at version 1.1 very soon and how we can promote it into a spec and then maybe into a standard. Let me just go through the introduction part. So we've got some key terms and definitions. We noticed that artificial intelligence we had defined, but I think we're going to update that in the later version to a more industry agreed standard. But here we are. Section 3 is really the main body of the guide, and goes through 10 individual sections. So 3.1 highlights that an organization or an entity should have a policy about how AI bill of materials can be created or the compliance behind it. That people are competent in their roles and an organization shall have various different people responsible for the whole process of getting the guide out. So that's in governance, security, safety, privacy, development, legal, supplier management. That an organization shall make program participants aware of the policy and the objectives and the effectiveness of the program and the implications of not following the program's requirement. That a program scope for working on a model is well defined and can be sort of governed and checked. And I think most of these things are probably already going to exist in companies. If you are developing a model, if you're working on a model, you're going to write down somewhere what you intend to do with that model. Section 3.5 looks at license obligations. And again, this was the background or foundation that OpenChain was built on. So a process shall exist for looking at the licenses for codes and the weights and the data sets. And that can include the training, testing, verification, etc., highlighting any obligations and restrictions or grants for each license. Again, I'd like to think most people are already doing that, but having that documented is probably key. If you recall, different ethical obligations. We ended up with just having one here on transparency. And it's not to highlight what you need to do to be transparent. This is just a process shall exist for reviewing if there are any transparency obligations in regulations. Um, and that is so you can keep up to date. At the moment, things may not be mandatory in the jurisdiction you're working in. So we didn't want to define what transparency obligations are, but to have a process to look for them is definitely key. People should be able to have access to it, and if you produce a model and distribute it, there should be a contact detail on there to say, go and reach out to these people. If you have any questions, that could just be a simple email alias. And then the actual AI bill of materials itself. So a process shall exist for creating and managing one, and it can be in any format, as we highlighted, SPDX, CycloDX, or any other format, for example, Hugging Face. And then the last section is around governance. An organization shall have governance framework policies and practices to ensure that AI systems are developed, deployed, and managed appropriately. And again, it's just having somebody looking at different AI regulations and laws coming out of different jurisdictions to ensure that they are conformant with the regulations in that jurisdiction that the model is being either deployed in or worked on. Great. So that was the guide. As I said, we've got version 1, and we're working on version 1.1 and then trying to make it into a specification and into possibly something further if we get board approval. And I think my ask to kind of the four of you is, think about this guide when you're working, and we'd really like to promote it. So have a think about whether it's suitable for your organization. And if you want to help and contribute, then come along to the rest of these meetings and do so. And with that, I shall pause and take any questions.
I put a question there in the chat. Basically, yes,
That's
thanks a lot again, Matthew. Second time I attend this, but yeah, it's great. Just wonder how to actually contribute to this document. Like, I know that that's a meeting, right? That we can have a talk like this, right? But what about like things that like asynchronous contribution, things like that? Yeah. Should we go for the Markdown one or the Word document? I think in the past we just like have a like live chat session together over the Google Docs, right? But I think that's somehow already converted into a Word document, and I don't know where to
yeah.
go next. Yeah.
It's as you wish, really. I've been working on the Word document and then make it into a Markdown file and then publishing it as a PDF when we get to like a more stable version. So I've been using, as I said, the Word document in these meetings. So if you want to add comments to the Word document, that's probably the best thing to do.
Uh-huh. Which it's going to be the same one that share on the Google Docs, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I see, I see. So that's the one. Okay, thank you. So basically the markdown version here it's more of how to say uh one of the final output formats
Correct. Yeah.
for
For version
people
1
who may prefer to read it
in
in
that
this
format,
format,
indeed.
right? I
Yeah.
see, I see. But the working version it's the Word document. Thank you.
Correct. Yeah.
In the meetings I missed, was there any discussion of the model openness framework, which is another kind of Linux Foundation affiliated thing?
If there was, I can't recall it.
Okay. It's just it has a convenient list of stuff you might want to include in an AIS bomb. I mean, it's more research focused, I guess, but in that it talks about grades of openness in relation to kind of reproducibility in research. So that's kind of why I'm more familiar with it. But yeah, I thought it was quite useful. And as I say, the guy who generated, or the group who generated, I think are affiliated with the Linux Foundation. So
Is that the sort of thing you can either connect me with that person or want to come and discuss that at a subsequent meeting?
I mean, I can try and guess and put you in touch. Yes, I shall do that. But I'll try and find a useful
Arnold,
link first.
right? Yeah.
Sorry?
I think the guy is, I don't know whether I pronounce his name correctly or not. I'm sorry. It's Arnold from IBM, right?
The guy I know, one of the
No, something
contributors is
like
a
that.
guy from the one of the
Yeah,
guys
yeah.
contributors, a guy called
Uh,
Kalian Osborne, who was who
actually,
at the Alternative Institute.
yeah, actually today at I guess you're based in UK, right, Rowan? Today at 3 p.m. The group the generative AI Commons uh
Hmm.
responsible AI working group, like stream, which is like responsible for that MOF. We'll
Yeah.
have weekly, bi-weekly meeting this afternoon. I can put the link in the chat if you like to join or later.
Thank you. Yes, that would be very useful.
Any other comments from anyone? What sort of things would you like to get out of these meetings this coming year?
But to me, it would be to get more people involved in general, because perhaps the past few months that I joined, it's a small circle of people, and I think for especially for the guide to get a lot of traction or to get a lot of input from the community, we need a lot more people involved.
So I agree with that. I will say that the other call, the US Europe time zone, is more well attended. There's typically 20, 30 people that join that. Um, but they ask for that group was to go out and kind of promote this guide and publish it. Because yes, you're right, we do need more people to get more adoption.
Yeah, and I agree because I I try to attend both in most cases as an ambassador. For me, my impression, at least the last time in December that I was, for example, in the Open Source Summit and the Open Compliance Summit, there is a lot of AI talk in Asia in general. So perhaps for this call and the people in this call, we need to think of way of promoting this activity in general within Asia, not just relying on the monthly call or this and that, but somehow to think of way to promote the overall working group to different sub communities. Because my general impression is that in Asia, for example, there are a lot of sub communities, but they're really closed up communities that either are not that open to the world, or they're simply focused in their sub ecosystem in their geographic region. And I think getting these people somehow involved is could be like one of
Is
the
what we want. Yeah.
primary objectives for us. Because I think we have enough knowledgeable people in both goals to keep drafting and adding to the guide, but it also needs to sort of have a coverage of
Promotion. Yeah.
like the yeah, the whole ecosystem.
Um, I have another quick question, which was, and again, sorry, it's just catching up because I missed so many meetings, but I noticed in your presentation you were talking about potentially capturing energy usage in training. Was there any more discussion about what a good format for that kind of data should be and methods of capture? I mean, I guess the EU AI Act has some very rough rules of thumb about kind of, amount of cycles put into training, but that doesn't directly map necessarily onto energy usage.
As you saw from the guide, we ended up not having it in.
Sure.
There were
But
meetings where we had a list of, I'm going to use the word contentious topics.
okay,
And I use that word maybe slightly inappropriately. It was kind of a list of topics that we couldn't get general consensus that we should have in.
right.
Energy usage was one of them, bias was another one, um, and so on. So we decided that let's stick with what we can get consensus on and then build off
Sure.
from there.
But I mean, I guess broadly speaking, there are things which you might end up having from external governance that you need to attest to. So until somebody starts holding our feet to the fire about these things, then we'll leave it.
Correct.
Well, we won't fight that. Yeah.
But would it? Yeah, I know that like to recommend to have such a field, right? Like energy or bias, right? In the S bomb, maybe like contentious, but that is possible still to recommend a format. Like if you want to have this information, this is the format that we recommend. For example, yeah.
Yeah, true. So I guess, I mean, in answer to your question, Matthew, about things we'd like to see, I mean, I mean, obviously, I come from a slightly non-standard organization for this kind of group, in that we're not really industry, but we're not really interact with them. So examples of how other organizations are dealing with putting the kind of data recording and publication facilities in place in order to be able to meet these standards, it would be very useful for us because there's much less command and control in a university, I think, than there generally is in a commercial organization. So we look to try and learn from more controlled organizations, and we're barely really there with open source license compliance, so we're a good few steps behind this kind of in terms of thinking about how we do our research data gathering and making sure that we're able to attest to its usage in these kind of systems is way off. But that's kind of why I attend, I guess. So as well as the pure theory of what it is we want to attest to, it's how other organizations with more control, internal control than we have, are putting them in place, is something that I look for.
Yes, and having studied at Oxford, I can understand
Yes.
the complexity, and this is being recorded, so I'm being careful with my words, of,
Yes.
having such diverse groups, even just within a department, and the
Yeah.
fact that in research institutions, you've got one group that is doing some work and then another group is almost completely independent. So to get Oxford University's stamp to attest this is possibly
Yeah.
impractical
Well,
because you've got so many other, I mean, it may be, and apologies if it's not, but you've just got so many different independent groups, whereas in an organization, everything all
yes.
funnels up to one CEO and everyone's responsible
Yeah. I
for it,
mean,
and there's a compliance officer with policies.
without being too boring on too much about us, we do have, there is a moment here though which could be taken advantage of, caused by, there's a kind of bottleneck around availability of compute and large scale data storage, which means that the traditional federated and scattered way that the university organizes itself is kind of drawing together in order to be able to take advantage of mutualized resources.
I
So
see.
that's a
Okay.
point at which it's possible to be able to say, by the way, guys, if you're going to do this together, maybe we should find a way of working together, which is, uh, you know, which meets these kind of goals, lofty goals, which I think this group has, rather than just saying let's catch can as we usually do.
Is there anything we can help facilitate there?
I guess maybe, I mean, you're right. The smallness of this group makes it a bit difficult, I guess. But I take the point that I should look up to the ones which are at different time zones. But yes, trying to get people to talk about their implementation, as I guess um, as long as it's useful for other people, obviously, as part of the activity of the group would be useful, I think. And I guess I think it's useful for the generation of the standard as well, in that it points up difficulties in what we're asking people to do. So it's kind of case
Mhm.
studies thing, I guess, really.
Okay, studies. Okay. The obvious question here is, do you want to present a case study?
Well, I mean, I've been bitten by this before because people are as you were saying, somewhat surprised to find the level of freedom available to a researcher within our institution, and that in turn means that we're not a great example for anyone else in this particular space of compliance, because compliance is a difficult task when you give people a lot of freedom.
Yes, but we understand why universities and researchers are giving that freedom. Yeah, so you
Sure.
can
Well,
innovate in a far different way than a company can.
Indeed, in principle, I'd be happy to do it. I'd have to go and ask various people who are
Of
higher above me
course.
in the organisation that they would be happy for me to be. I've done it in other contexts before, but as I say, the reaction generally is really from the people who listen. So,
Okay. Any other comments from anyone else?
Not specifically to the guide, but I posted, I presume you're well aware of this event that we're organizing, that's OpenChain and Friends in the end of March in Stuttgart. And Andrew Katz and the others, I think, are already involved in the organization of the AI topic stream. I know from the board, because we, the different organizers and then the stream responsibles, are not that really in sync with the individual um, streams and what exact topics will be included until it's finalized. But I know the guide is one of the primary topics that will be presented at the event. So I think that this could also be a chance to get more eyes on this and to get more feedback by
Brilliant.
generally
Do
the
you know
community.
who is presenting the AIS bomb guide?
Generally the only one that's currently listed as a stream responsible, because I do the open source compliance and OSPO stream. Thomas Oslander is the responsible for artificial intelligence stream. Specifically about the topic, the link actually leads to the overall page when it was announced last year. I can check and feedback to you because I'm not part of the organization of that stream because I have my stream to to worry about. But I know that Andrew Katz is involved in the topic stream organization. To what capacity, I cannot really confirm as
If
of
you
now.
could,
But
if you could
yeah.
find out, and feel free to put me on copy to the email. I'm not going to be in Stuttgart.
Yeah.
I might be able to dial in,
Mhm.
but yeah, I'm not going to be there. So just curious to know that this is, and can I provide guidance to anyone who is promoting this if they're,
Mhm. I
giving
know that
a
they
talk?
have a matrix room within the channel, so I can send you the link to the room if you're
Great.
fine with this. And there is a live discussion there for what's going on. I think that's probably the best hands-on approach that we can have with this.
Sounds good.
Cool. But yeah, for anyone else here, if you're interested, I posted the link in the chat, so have a look. And there are a lot of interesting topics, not just AI, but anything open chain related in a way. So yeah,
and
it's getting bigger and bigger.
remote attendance is generally possible, is it?
Sorry?
Remote attendance is generally possible, is it? Because I'm unlikely to be in Stuttgart as well, but it
No,
does it very okay.
unfortunately not, because it's different locations, different
Sure.
streams, and it's primarily how we organize it the past few years. It's tend to be face to face,
Okay.
and it's getting harder and harder to get funding, especially for facilitating virtual attendance in a way.
Mhm.
But typically, what we did the past few years, especially the last one when it was the first time that it was titled OpenChain and Friends, we actually did facilitate a lot of the talks were transferred into webinars under OpenChain that were recorded and are part of the overall webinar list. So if you go there,
Okay.
you can check. Typically, the topics that are presented are later presented as a larger, more detailed presentation because typically during the event they'll get 15 to 20 minutes, let's say
Right.
30 minutes at best paid depending on the schedule of the topic stream. But on like in a webinar setting they'll have way more time to really convey a message.
Okay, that's useful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So it's the middle day, it looks like, when most of this AI discussion is happening. 25th.
Yeah, so I can check the concept board. The AI is
So it kicks off the
currently.
parallel tracks.
Yeah,
There's only an AI
so
one
day
till 4
one,
o'clock in the
day
festival.
one on 20, yeah, day one on 24th, they have the second half of the afternoon, and they have day 2 full day track.
Yeah.
Minus an hour or so. So 24 or 25th is primarily when they do. But there are a lot of conferences, settings, and breakout sessions here and there. So I guess this won't be just that. But for the time being, this is what we have as planning for that particular topic.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Well, if there's nothing else, I can leave you to the rest of your day. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll speak again soon.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.